Yep, people are starting to come in. Yep, the numbers are going up. Good evening, everyone. We're just going to give everyone a few minutes to join, and then we'll get started. Okay, we're going to start in 1 minute. Yeah, people are still coming in. Lovely. Okay, I'm going to get started. Good evening and welcome to the Black Baby Loss Awareness Week webinar, the first one ever. I'm so thrilled that so many of you are joining us this evening. The theme of today, day 4 of Black Baby Loss Awareness Week, is baby loss and mental health. I want to thank the lovely Laura Bridle for helping to facilitate this webinar this evening, because I didn't have the know-how, I didn't have the resources, but Laura made it happen. And that's why we're all here this evening. And I want to welcome all of our fantastic speakers. And I'll introduce myself quickly before I introduce the first speaker, who will be Karen Njuguna, who's a midwife. So I'll just quickly introduce myself. My name is Alicia Burnett. I'm a registered midwife. I work for Tommy's, the pregnancy and baby charity, and I'm the founder of Black Baby Loss Awareness Week. I founded the week because I lost my son in 2017, and I never spoke about him, because when I did, quite soon after my loss, the responses I received were not positive. So I just stopped talking about him, and I lived my life as if my bereavement had never happened. I lived half a life. I began speaking about my son publicly in 2022, and I began working for Tommy's in January 2023. I work on the helpline for Black and mixed Black heritage women, and I found very quickly that baby loss is a huge thing in the Black community, and it's an even bigger thing that we don't receive the support that we need. We don't. So I decided to launch an awareness week that raises awareness within the Black community of the support that is available. And also because I don't feel that Black families are very well represented in the baby loss community. You don't see us as the voices in inquiries or in news reports. You don't see us at functions. You don't see us represented very well in the charities. So that's why I launched Black Baby Loss Awareness Week last year. It's the second year, and I'm going to go launching into this webinar. Karen, are you ready?
I am ready. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Alicia, for having me on this webinar today. I will now share my slides. I've got a small presentation talking about the role of the bereavement midwife, and I'll also show a couple of videos. There's no images of babies, but it is an emotive subject, so I'll put my contact details in the chat if anyone needs to reach out to me after the webinar. So, okay. Okay, so that's me. I work at Lewisham and Greenwich NHS Trust as a bereavement midwife. I've been a midwife for 13 years, and I've been in this role for 3 years now. And I've always had an interest in looking after women who've had a loss. I looked after a lot of women while I was working on labor ward. I was a labor ward midwife prior to coming into this role. And when the position became available, I felt that this is what I wanted to do. So I think I sort of wanted to introduce this session with just looking at these statistics. This is a perinatal report that came out, was published in December, and it's looking at deaths from birth from January to December 2021. And as you can see, it talks about the rate of stillbirth and neonatal death. And for both, you can see there's been a slight increase in both. But I think what is more shocking, and you know, we hear this all the time, is it feels like you know the odds are against Black people. And as you can see in in these statistics here, that Black people are that is our rate as compared to our white counterparts. So, in every 1,000 births, Black people will experience 7.52 stillbirths as opposed to the white counterparts. So, so this slide, is quite interesting, and we keep having these conversations around these statistics. There's a lot of work that goes into looking at the reasons why. And I thank Alicia, for creating spaces like this, and organizations such as, Five Times More, because we are beginning to have these conversations that are specific to us, and asking questions around, why this is happening, especially, in the Black and Asian population. Um, so again, I just thought I would put this slide here, and this is just to talk about the bereavement care standards, and everything we do revolves around the bereavement care pathway, which was launched in 2017. Is a national bereavement care pathway, and the pathway was launched to improve the care, for women following pregnancy and baby loss, and its aim is to ensure that all bereaved parents are offered equal and high, individualized, safe and sensitive care. And this pathway consists of 5 pathways. So you've got the miscarriage pathway, you've got termination of pregnancy for fetal anomalies, you've got the stillbirth pathway, you've got the neonatal death pathway, and you've got the sudden unexpected death of an infant pathway. And what it is, in a nutshell, like I said, this underpins everything we do, not limited to this, but everything we do as bereavement midwives. 127 trusts have signed up to the National Bereavement Care Pathway. There's only 2 trusts left in England, and we are trying to standardize that care. And in a nutshell, it means that that in our standards, we will have parent-led bereavement care plans. We will do training. We will offer emotional support. We will have a bereavement lead. That is myself. We will have dedicated bereavement rooms where we can look after families that have experienced a loss. And also, we will offer families informed choices, offer them opportunities to make memories, make sure we have a signaling system to say there's been a bereavement, and also we will act as a support for healthcare staff. So even though, I'm part of these standards, mainly what I do. So at the center of all of this is the family that unfortunately have suffered a loss, and is to ensure that we are providing them, high quality individualized care. So in my role, in a nutshell, is to make sure that all of this is happening, and looking at ways in which we can improve the care, because we are constantly reviewing ways in which we can improve our care. So, but on a day-to-day basis, as a bereavement midwife, these are some of the things that we do. We offer emotional support, and we make sure that we are present on the wards to support the staff, and also making sure that we are validating the emotions of grieving family and creating a safe space for them to be able to express their grief. We also offer practical guidance and practical support in terms of planning funeral arrangements, appointment, signposting. We also offer continuity of care. So once the families are discharged from home, we ensure that they have that continuity of care. So in a nutshell, we are a single point of contact for these families. And this is important because they don't have to keep speaking to different people. revisiting their experience and explaining what has happened to them. So we're very much like a signpost, everything they need. And like I said, it's not just limited to this, arranging registration appointments. I found myself many times, just attending funerals, just in a capacity of supporting these families. Again, we know that there's people who are in this country and they don't have any families, they don't have any support, and so it's important to be able to identify that and support these families. So and again, we advocate for bereaved families. How do we do that? We make sure that we are advocating for their unique needs and perspectives for grieving families. And, we make sure that the healthcare providers and policymakers are listening. And how we do this is by also collecting feedback from families, launching a maternity bereavement survey, for example. When the women go home, we ask about our care, because we want to continuously review the care that we offer and see how, we can improve that care. But also we talk about, cultural sensitivity, for our women who come from other backgrounds. So it's ensuring that the staff providing the care aware of the families they're looking after, and also engaging them in those communications. As much as it's a very difficult conversation to have, we need to make sure that we are providing that care, we are engaging these families with that communication. We also do community engagement, where we collaborate with local support groups, charities, and other organizations to make sure that the families are signposted to invaluable resources and networks that can support them. Recently, we launched a support group that has been very successful in my trust, and it's a very useful space. And I think we've shared that, especially with the midwives in the Southeast London. And this is a very useful space where women come together, with other women who have, unfortunately gone through a loss, and it's a safe space for them to be able to express their emotions, but also talk about some of the challenges they face after the loss. We advocate for systemic change. We collect a lot of data. So the slides that I showed before, that is some of the data that we submit to national organizations. And what they do, they look at trends, and then they offer recommendations, and we are responsible for ensuring that we implement those recommendations. And we've talked about empowering families, and advocating for change in the healthcare system. So I am now going to show you a short video, and this video is by Abigail's Footsteps. And we use this video a lot, for training of health professions, and so that they can know how better to support the bereaved families. The film focuses on the experiences of mothers having a second child following a loss, and also the psychological struggle, to embrace the birth of a second child. So I thought it's useful because these families, they also occupy our spaces in community, and it's important for us to also now know how we can support them as well as they go through this journey. So I will now play the video. Oh, sorry. Oh, okay. So I will stop sharing and play the video from the internet. Just bear with me 1 second.
I got your back if you need me.
Okay, hold on. I should have taken that IT class. Yeah, so this is good. Okay.
Is that your first?
Yeah. Our first passed a few days after birth.
His name was Jordan.
Hi, sweetie.
Hi, Mom. You can't say his name.
I prefer to look to the future.
And forget the past. Some of us don't have that luxury. I think about him every single day. But it feels like I'm the only one who does. It's like he never even happened. Not even a mention. Not even his name.
Looking forward to becoming a mother.
I already am a mother. This is the only place you ever got to see.
Kids get things passed down from older siblings all the time.
Yes, but this is different.
Yes, it is, because he didn't use it.
How could you not remember?
Oh, ice waters are broken.
I'm terrified.
It's completely understandable, Jess. After everything you've been through with Jordan.
That's it.
What is it then?
I'll stop sharing. So, and again, I thought, like I said, I thought that video is quite important, in the essence of showing it's important to recognize, all pregnancies for these women. They never forget, and also knowing how to support these women in our community, because they live in our community, they live in our social gatherings. And I think the greatest fear, from some of the feedback we get is that they will forget. People forget that they've had this child, and even though it's not a living child, it's a pregnancy, it's a child that was wanted. So it's just important to recognize, that loss and whatever they're going through, and just know how we can support them. So I will quickly. Oh, hold on. Okay, so I will quickly go back to my slides.
There are a few things we need to discuss.
Sorry, something was playing in the background. Can you see the presentation? Yeah.
You can see it. Yeah, it hasn't started
Okay.
sharing yet. Yeah,
Okay.
Perfect.
Okay. All right. And I talked about training and development for staff. So we do a lot of professional development, ongoing workshops, peer-to-peer learning opportunities to ensure that, midwives stay up to date with best practices. But it's not just midwives, all health professions that, will come into contact with families, women who've had a loss. For example, last week, Laura and I did a training session with the sonographers, because we realized that they will also be the ones breaking the bad news. So talking to them about how you break the bad news, but also identifying anxiety around women who've had previous losses, and well-being support, regular supervision, counseling, self-care. We talk to women about self-care workshops and how to manage their emotions due to the demands of the role. So a lot of training goes into this. I do a lot of training for midwives, doctors, student midwives. And again, the much wider conversation is around training, is how we can implement this in the curriculum, so that the students going into the university have a module where they're taught about bereavement care, because at the moment the first they hear about anything bereavement is when they come into placement. But we need to be able to embed this in the curriculum so that they learn the theory, and by the time they come, they're aware of what is expected. And all of this is to ensure that we improve the care that we offer families. So I have just one last video to show you, and then I'm done. So just bear with me. And I think that video, says it all. I've watched it so many times, and every time I watch it, it brings tears to my eyes. And the message from this is that grief is a lifetime experience. Parents tell us that, they don't forget, they carry it with them, they learn to make room for the grief that they experience, and if, even time doesn't change that. With time, they will learn how to carry it differently, but certainly they don't forget. And when you're in these spaces talking to these families, think about that video and think about all the dreams and the hopes that they had for the child, the baby that they wanted, that were all cut short. So I think that's it from me. And I think we have a panel. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask me on the panel. Thank you.
Karen, I was sitting here listening to you thinking, I don't think I'm the right person to be hosting this webinar because I'm going to cry. Bereavement midwives are some of my favourite professionals. After my loss, I hounded the bereavement midwife at the hospital where I was training. I wanted to be with her all the time. I wanted to know more about what she did to support families like mine. And I don't think people know much about the pastoral support element of your role, attending funerals, offering care in subsequent pregnancies. If a woman that had a loss came in with a subsequent pregnancy, she'd know about it somehow, and she'd come and find them and say, hi, how are you doing? How far along are you now? Would you like support again in this pregnancy? I love that you provide training for sonographers. I love you for that, because when I was pregnant with my daughter, the pregnancy I had after losing my son had a catastrophic fetal anomaly. So the dating scan and the anomaly scan were very pressurized and high anxiety times for me. And I needed a sonographer that would understand that I've got a history of fetal anomaly and I need you to handle me with care. And she didn't. So I really appreciate that you're doing that training with sonographers, because everybody in the MDT, everybody in the maternity unit needs to be able to respond compassionately to everyone that they care for. And I do agree that bereavement care needs to be embedded into the curricula, needs to be. It's not okay that the first time a student learns about loss is when loss is happening in front of them. Because how are they supposed to hold space for that woman? How are they supposed to hold space for themselves? Midwifery is sad and it's happy, the good and the bad. But I think we sometimes focus too much on the positive outcomes, because as we all know, the negative outcomes are far too common.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Alicia.
I've composed myself now. I think we're going to move on to our panel now, featuring the wonderful Eileen Morrison. Did I say your name correctly, Eileen? Fantastic. Who's a birth trauma specialist midwife, and the fantastic Celine Walters. Could you please both start off this panel? So the name of the panel is The Mental Health Impact of Baby Loss in Black Communities. I'm going to invite you both to start the panel off by introducing yourselves, your role, and just giving an outline of your experience working with bereaved parents. So I'll start with you, Illy.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Alicia, for inviting me to be part of this. Yes, my name's Eileen Morrison. I am a registered midwife and birth trauma expert. I am also an author and podcast host, so I do lots of different things. And I run an Instagram page called Mixing Up Motherhood, which is, I don't really know what it started as, but it's now become sort of a space that definitely has a high focus on advocacy and intersectionality in lots of those areas that we find ourselves. So it might be about cooking one day and about genocide the next, but it crosses lots of intersections that I think impact all of us in some way or another. In my day-to-day, I'm a birth debrief facilitator, so I offer private birth reflections, having left the NHS in 2020. this kind of gives me a very good sort of scope for understanding what is taking place out there in the wild, with a level of impartiality. I don't have any loyalty except for those who are in front of me. I have no fear of litigation. Maybe I should a little bit more, but I don't have that in terms of, you know, protecting NHS money, which I think is so deeply ingrained in us when we work for these trusts. And also, you know, I think midwifery has been under a lot of, you know, negative light, creating further defensiveness, meaning that when people do come with birth trauma and things like that, sometimes the reaction is very defensive, and I don't need to defend anyone. So it doesn't mean that I attack everyone, but it means that actually the kind of ways in which I can view things can be quite helpful for those who perhaps are more triggered going into their hospitals or have lost trust or faith in the system that they feel has failed them. So yeah, it's an incredible job. It's an incredible job. I am grateful every single day to be able to do it, to have earned people's trust. And I think it's something that is so important in the work that we do, that we earn trust. And you have to do it quite quickly. People are vulnerable and they need to know very quickly that, you know, you've got them. And it's definitely been a skill that I've honed over the past 4 years. If I go back, I sometimes think I feel embarrassed. Like, I'm like, gosh, when you first started. But that's growth, isn't it? That's what we should be. We should be able to look back and see how far we've come. So yes, I wrote a book in 2000, and it's a year old, so 2023, called The Birth Debrief, which is all about sort of reflecting, re-informing and reframing experiences, whether you're choosing to have another baby or not, or whatever decisions you're making around advocacy and agency and centering yourself. So I'll stop talking about myself now, but yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Thank you very much, Illy. Celine, would you like to introduce yourself, your role, and outline your experience of working with bereaved parents?
Of course. Thank you for having me, Alicia. My name's Celine Walters. I have been a midwife for 15.5 years. I am very lucky to have worked alongside Laura Bridle, one of our panelists, and I also work with Karen in bereavement as well. I've been in community all of my career, so I've always had an ability to work with women and families that have experienced loss. And for me, loss encompasses everything, because the minute you do your pregnancy test and you've got those 2 blue lines, you've planned your whole life, like the video Karen has just shown us. So when that baby's taken away from you, whether you're 6 weeks pregnant or it's a term pregnancy, you've lost your life. So I spend a lot of time navigating that system with women. I've come into the bereavement space formally with Karen, so I'm really lucky to work with her. And although I thought I knew some things, she's teaching me so much more, and feel really privileged to be able to do that and do it in a formal way, so people know where to come, who to come to, they're seeing representation. And I think that's also really important in our role, because it's not seen. If people don't see it, they're not going to think it's for them. So yeah, I'm also the co-founder of Conversations with the Midwife, which is a platform and organisation for women to be able to navigate maternity services, because people don't know how to navigate the services. It's about empowerment, teaching, so not just teaching women, but teaching our students, teaching our families how to do things, how to communicate with professionals, because accessing healthcare is really difficult at the best of times. And then couple that with a loss, couple that with coming from outside of the UK, it's even more difficult. So I'm really proud to be able to support people in that space.
Lovely. 2 fantastic panelists. I'm sure you'll all agree. I'm going to start off with my first question. You can decide who answers first. So my first question is, have you supported many Black families affected by pregnancy and baby loss?
Celine?
Yeah, do you want to go? Yes, I have. So like I said, I've been in community all of my career. So yes, I have supported many families, and a good few Black families who have experienced baby loss, but not just Black families, our mixed families, Asian women as well. So if you're not white, you know, you're classed as black or a minority ethnic. So I have been able to support a lot of families with that. And with that comes all of the things you learn about experiencing loss as a black person, the cultural differences, the cultural norms, what you're allowed to say, what you're not allowed to say. So yes, I have.
For me, as someone who works privately, it kind of is a little bit different. And what I found, for at least the first 2 years, was that most of the people that were accessing my services were sort of white middle class women. And I present as black, I'm very openly Muslim, and I was like, what's going on here? Like, what are the barriers? And there was a question posed as to whether or not the barrier was financial. And I just, you know, I actually find it so deeply insulting to imply that actually what is preventing black families from reaching out for help is because they don't have money. It really speaks to those kind of deep-rooted biases that we carry around why people aren't accessing support. And actually, I had to do a lot of looking inwards as to why that wasn't happening. It wasn't actually to do with them. It was to do with marketing, and it was to do with welcoming, and it was to do with sometimes being really explicit about what the offering was and who it was for. Because as Celine was saying, you know, you need to, or Celine or Karen, I'm sorry, you need to know that something is for you. You need to be welcomed into something, particularly a space that perhaps has not very clearly been welcoming for you. And so once I did that, then things started changing. And that it's interesting because it kind of meant leveling up. Like, you know, I would code switch when speaking, you know, publicly, and you know, use a different voice and blah 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 and all of this stuff. And it was like, actually just be yourself, because actually that's who people want. Once I did that, then black families started coming in, and it was amazing because it helped me to understand those barriers, but also the ways in which, you know, what to say, what not to say, how to understand the cultural sensitivities that exist in an experience that I have not lived and hopefully will never. But it's taught me a lot. And actually, I find what I've learned from black families and non-white families has really helped me to provide overall better care. It's that equity, isn't it? You know, where you kind of go, it's opened my eyes to the needs of everyone, not just the needs of that individual family. So yes, and it is a real privilege to have that trust from people who have been mistreated by the system. So it's, you know, it's great.
Fantastic, thank you both. My second question is, in your professional experience, what are some of the mental health challenges faced by black parents affected by baby loss?
I mean, are you okay if I answer this, Celine?
Yeah, go for it.
So interestingly, I actually think it's not even just in baby loss, but I think actually accessing grief as a part of yourself. I think that is a real cultural barrier that black families do have. You know, my parents are Jamaican, and even with their generation and my grandparents, it's like, pick up yourself, like, you're fine, like, you know, these things happen. And so the battle is really about kind of saying, no, it's okay to kind of feel like you're crumbling, it's okay to feel fragile, and it's okay for your mental health to be impacted. It's actually quite normal, because what we do find is, you know, was speaking to my grandma maybe like 5 years ago, and she said she just dropped in conversation that she'd had a baby at 8 months pregnant, and they took it from her. It died. They took it from her, and she said, I don't know where they buried it, but within 3 months I was pregnant again. And I was like, excuse me? Okay, that had never been discussed. They'd never unpacked it. But also, as I now watch her in her old age, but also the relationships that she has with her children, I think, you know, there's a lot there. There's so much trauma there that was never dealt with. And that is actually really the barrier to supporting black families with mental health issues. And if we kind of I'm not going to speak for much longer, but you know, again, Black dads, it's a whole other kettle of fish, and allowing them, granting them the permission to be soft. And I think that is what is often lacking, and what I found is the biggest barrier to supporting Black families with mental health following loss or any type of struggle.
You just said a whole load there, Illy.
It's too much, I'm sorry. I do that. Oh,
No, I'm reflecting on my own family. Yes, Celine.
Some of it's going to overlap, but it's a stigma attached to baby loss. It's the cultural differences. It's what you're allowed to say. It's that what Ilia's just said in terms of being tough, being strong, the typical association with being Black. You know, being able to just let things bounce off of you and get on with life. You can't just get on with life. It's speaking your baby's name or not being allowed to speak your baby's name, being provided that space to speak about it. And even in my own personal experience, not speaking about a loss I've encompassed as well. So I've lived it and I see it in the families that I'm providing care for. So there is a stigma attached to accessing mental health services anyway. Couple that with losing your baby, it's even more difficult. And culturally, I don't know why we're like this. I don't know why we don't just say, come, it's okay. But hopefully as each generation comes forward, they know that it becomes easier to share that space. And I hope that none of my children ever go through baby loss. But if they ever did, I'd be able to let them come to me with open arms and have that ability to grieve, because we don't grieve. And I think grief in general is hidden. People don't know how to talk to people when there has been a loss, and that's difficult anyway. And then when someone's lost a baby, suddenly, you know, people put the barriers up because they don't know how to even say, how are you? So there's so many different challenges associated with baby loss in the Black community.
Can I just add something to that, which is also what we do find, and I know that obviously, you know, you both heard Lewisham and Greenwich, but I'm based in Norwich and the mental health team are all white. And we do have the issue with the perception or how grief is allowed to be expressed. So it's like, oh, do you need extra support? Well, they might say no, but that no might mean just prod a little bit more, ask me again. But they're like, well, she said no, or she's not really crying, or, you know, all of these things are really, 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 they're real barriers, because our own cultural biases mean that we can't see people for who they are. We can't understand reactions as just being someone's grief response. And instead it's like, oh, well, they're aggressive, they're angry, they don't care, they're fine. Interestingly, I recently lost my mum, and I can talk about it absolutely fine. It was very sudden, really shocking, but I remember someone being like, but you're fine. I was like, but you're silly. Like, you're silly, because how could I possibly be fine? There is no love like a mother's love. So how could I possibly be fine? But because I'm talking to you now, you've decided I don't need to ask, I don't need to check in. She's fine. That's based on someone else's perception of an emotional response. And also it's because that person has not provided the safety for me to go, I'm not fine. Like, I am a lost child, but you don't get to do that. I remember when I trained in Oxford, this is big old Oxfordshire, like, you know, we've got a big population, and the bereavement midwife there said, this was on a training day for student midwives, and she said, be careful of Asian men. And I was like, oh, steady. What are you saying? She said, be careful of Asian men, because they often don't let their wives grieve. They don't really like pictures of the babies. They don't really cry, and they're often in a rush to just get the baby buried and be done. And I was like, oh, that's really fascinating. And I was the only Black student across 3 cohorts and the only Muslim student across 3 cohorts. So I was like, we're going to have to talk about this. And obviously then you come with the issue of being the Black person to flag something, and everyone's like, oh, race card, yada, yada. But the problem is that how were you treating bereaved Asian families?
Yeah.
You've basically assumed that the father doesn't allow the mother to grieve. The father doesn't really care. He doesn't want the memorabilia that you would provide for white families. And in actual fact, he's someone to be wary of. So if this is how we're being met in our grief, how are we being met in our mental health as non-white people? So, you know, it's definitely something to be aware of and to think of in terms of those cultural sensitivities and those biases that we might have. And also, let's just not cast everyone with the same brush. Like it's a little bit weird, to be honest. I'll stop.
I could listen to you both all night, I promise you. Okay. I'm moderating this, so I'm going to just move on to my next question. Thank you both so much. The next question I wanted to ask is, in your experience, is there anything that makes mental health support following baby loss more therapeutic for Black parents? And I'm going to start with you, Celine.
All right, yes, I think there is. I think being able to speak about your loss is really important, and feeling safe to speak about your loss. It's not just a tick box exercise. I know within our region there are a couple of great services. So one of them is a therapeutic service, which is in an artistic form. So people are able to express their loss through drawing, through art, through drama. Not everybody is able to write down their feelings. I've got someone that I'm caring for, and writing is a trigger for her. So I know that by accessing art form, that's a better way for her to manage her grief and her loss. So there are different types of services. But again, it's knowing that they're available, and is someone able to create that service and then promote it, because there's so many different things, but we just don't know. There's not enough of our directory that says, actually, I know that if you go to Lewisham or Croydon, you can access service A or B. So we need to probably do a bit more cohesion in terms of knowing what services are also available.
Lovely. And Illy?
So for me, I really think that it's silence, like the power of silence. And I think it's, you know, when in bereavement, like we always want to make noise. You know, the amount of things that people say, like, it's like, stop talking, just stop talking, stop talking, stop talking. You're making it worse, stop talking, you know, like, because they're just trying, because we've been socialized to think that we can fix things. Well, guess what? I've lost a baby and you can't fix it. So in actual fact, for me, as someone who is facilitating birth debrief, sometimes I'm like, do you want to talk about it? You know, you grant them the permission to speak or not speak. And sometimes it's like they think, oh God, if I've got to go and see the mental health support, I have to speak and I have to say something and I have to have something to tell, or I have to talk about my feelings. And actually, when you say to them, we can just sit here, you know, like those are what safe spaces sometimes contain. Silence. You know, I wish more people did that. And sometimes when we give people silence, that's the only invitation that they needed. It was like, so you know, I'm just listening, and we can go an hour here and you don't need to say anything, because maybe they've had to talk about it over and over again. Maybe they don't want to talk about it anymore. You know, maybe they don't, maybe it doesn't work for them. You know, it's like what Celine was saying, for some people talking was just not it. So maybe they don't want to do that. And so we grant them the permission to choose. That's how we can create safe spaces and comfort for those people who are in the depths of bereavement.
It's really interesting that you say that. I did a live yesterday with a group of Black parents from SAN's Roundtable group. So they're Black parents that have experienced bereavement, and they come together and they talk about their experiences and the ways that they think support services could be improved. And one of the attendees was a man, a Black man. And how often do you get to hear a Black man speak about their bereavement experience? And I asked him, I needed this when I lost my son, my partner needed that. And we never came together because I just couldn't. I just was very much doing this and he was doing what he was doing. And I asked this gentleman, his name is Peter Reeves. Him and his wife Gina lost their son Dante in 2022. I asked him, so from your experience, what is it that you needed? What bereavement support was it that you needed? Because I don't know. And I've been through bereavement. I didn't know how to support my partner. And he said it was silence. Men don't necessarily want to sit there and talk about what's happened to them. They want football on the telly, their friends or their support people around them just watching the football or not even really watching it, just silence. And that was a huge eye opener for me, because I was talking about what happened all the time. And when I reflect, I was talking to myself. I was doing all the talking and I wasn't doing any of the listening. So I just think it's interesting that you've picked up on that. The next question I want to ask.
Did Karen, have you got your hand up? Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
Poor
no,
moderation on my part. Please go ahead.
No,
Karen.
that's absolutely fine. And let me lower my hand. And I think I was just going to just add a point about, training. So training is something that, I'm really passionate about, and I do a lot of it because I think it empowers, the staff to also be able to support these families, because that's what it comes down to, the support that this family get, while they're accessing the service. And we all know that bereavement is very uncomfortable. And if you think about midwifery and why we came to midwifery, bereavement, baby loss is on the other end of the spectrum, so I think a lot of training, staff training, is important. And like you said, you can't change what has happened, but you can give care that makes sure that the families have a positive experience in what is a very, difficult time that they're going through. So I think that staff empowering, and for them to be able to know that they can sit there in silence, because silence is also, very uncomfortable, and I tell them all the time, even in my 3 years of it, experience, I don't know what I'm going to say or do until I get into a room, because again, you don't know how that family is processing the grief. And this is where, we talk about, personalized care, centering what you do around what you see or what you meet in the room, and asking questions. We know that family tell us, they want us to ask. People say to me, oh, I didn't know they wanted this, or I didn't know. Did you ask? All you have to do is ask what's important to you. And today we were doing a round table talking about, diversity and cultural sensitivity. And I made a point, I said this conversation needs, to happen antenatally, what is important to you in your culture. We can't make assumptions, just because families are Muslim, they're not going to consent for postmortem, that stereotyping assumptions that we make. So I think empowering staff to be able to, ask those questions, to be confident in the care that they offer is key to ensuring that, we're improving, the care for, these communities, and especially the ethnic minority communities. We may feel that we are not able to occupy those spaces comfortably for whatever reason.
Thank you so much for adding that, Karen. And I promise I'm going to be a better moderator from now on. I've just checked the chat. There's so many questions. I'm going to circle back to the chat, okay? And I'm going to answer your questions afterwards. I'm sorry, I got too absorbed in what's being said. I realised that question 4 is very similar to the question I just asked you. So I'm going to bypass it and jump to my final question. And anyone actually can answer this, because it's a fantastic question, I think, even though I came up with it myself. Is there a bereavement service that any of you would like to highlight as an example of good practice?
Can I highlight more than one?
Yeah, as many as possible.
I think Helix is great because it provides that space. It's so needed because there's just so many brilliant professionals in one space, and they've all got such phenomenal experience. That means it's a safe place for women to go. I think Tommy's is brilliant because I directed a lot of women there as well. Your platform, Alicia, knowing where people can go, we use our phones so much. So if you can click a button and see, oh, brilliant, I can access this service, it makes it so much easier, and you can dip in and dip out of what you want to access. And I also want to big up myself and Karen as well, because I think we do a really good job in the space we provide for women. Our group, we run it with 2 other midwives at our trust, and the group has only been going a few months, but I've learned so much from the women that have come to the group. Okay, I'm coming. Sorry. I've learned so much from the women that have come to the group as well. So yeah, I think all of those services.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I would second Helix, and Tommy's as well. I also think that what you have created, Alicia, is absolutely incredible. But not only because when we've gone through traumas, it can sometimes feel like there is nowhere to take it and nothing to do with it. It's a negative. And to take your experience, to share it publicly, and then to build something from it so that others can benefit is immense. And I think sometimes because you're so familiar with speaking about your story and all of this stuff, and it's become work, I think you forget that actually the heart of it is you. And so, you know, really do continue this work. I think it's so impressive what you, Karen, and Celine are doing, because in actual fact, so yes, there are ethnic minority groups around the country, but I actually think that in places like South London, you have a sort of such a high concentration that there are like subcultures within cultures, and you're kind of bringing them all together to go, but guess what? It doesn't matter. And that's in those communities that people overlook. So it's like, if you are in a smaller place and there's a small population of ethnic minorities, everyone's like, come together, yay, we'll do a little group for an ethnic minority, it's great. But when you are in a place where it is predominantly ethnic minorities, and then to create something specifically for them is incredible. So please, you know, never take for granted. I know this work is tiring and there are days that you're just like, bloody hell, but you know, I'm absolutely certain that what you're doing is incredible. So, you know, hats off to you, and I hope that you just continue in your growth. And yeah, please, if I can, I will be signposting people to you as well, with pleasure.
Thank you. Oh, don't start. Come on. Come on. Thank you both so much. Would anybody else like to share an example of a service that is a good example of good practice? No, you sure? Well, I think the examples that you provided have been fabulous. I know it's really, I don't want to say it's easy to highlight examples of poor practice. It's not easy. It has to be done. It's necessary. But when there are examples of good practice, I think other services should look at those examples and try and copy, collaborate, because you're making a difference. These stats don't change. You're trying your very best. If everybody else tried their very best by copying the example that you've set, we can change things. So yes, big up yourself.
Actually, I'm going to add to that. I'm going to big up myself. Like,
yes, Illy.
You know, and the reason I'm going to do that is because actually I'm working in a space that's private. Ain't nobody paying my bills. Like I have to be going after my work and making sure I am showing up day in, day out to provide safe spaces for people and to educate people in terms of, you know, when there's hospital trusts that are flopping left, right, and centre, I'm like, you need to bring people in to come and teach, and they don't. And I go into these spaces and I'm like, let's teach, let's break it down. And it's taken so much work to build this with no backing. I'm young, I'm Black, I'm Muslim. Theoretically, everything's against me. And I'm very proud of what I provide. So I'm just taking that minute to kind of like big up my chest.
Yes. So that brings us to the end of our panel, but I'm going to circle back to the chat. So Karen, this comment's for you. Thank you for the presentation, well executed. That's from Kahara, Mary Kahara. Great presentation, Karen, well done. That's from Flora. Sue says, well done, Karen. Mary wants to know if there's any training offered for health visitors. That's a fantastic question, and that's for you, Karen.
Not that I know of, but yeah, I mean, Laura and I, we are more than happy to venture in all the spaces and offer training. And but yeah, there's a lot of training that is offered by SANS. Most of it is free, short 2-hour sessions. So there's bereavement care is evolving, and there's a lot of awareness around, wanting to improve care. So there's always something out there. Child Bereavement UK, SANS, they offer training, so you can look into those areas. But yeah, there's still a lot of work to do. But we've started having these conversations, and it's important. I received no formal training whatsoever, none. Everything I know about what I do, I have taught myself, through all of those online training, and you learn on the job as you go. So, but yeah, we are getting there. We are getting there. And like I said, the most important part is to embed bereavement training in the curriculum. That's where it starts. Because at the moment, we are doing a top bottom approach, as opposed to starting at the bottom, where we are training the health visitors, anybody that comes into contact with families that have had a loss, giving them that grounded theory, so that when they come into practice, they already have that and they build on it.
Thank
I
you
will
very
just
much.
add though, go to your
Go ahead.
management. Go to your management and be like, we need this training. Sometimes it has to be highlighted, and make sure that it's documented that you requested that training. Because actually they'll just do whatever they want. They want to maintain the status quo, and we're here to be like, no, we're not doing that. So go to your management, hound them, be like, I know we could get this training, we need this training, and see what comes of it.
Fantastic advice, Illy, and thank you so much, Karen. I just want to add, the Lullaby Trust do Care of the Next Infant training. It's free, and it would support you to support families in a pregnancy after loss. Another comment here. I know, Illy, you have to go, so I'm really racing through this. Auntie says, well done, Lady K, great presentation. Emma says, thank you for your presentation, Karen. Najma, thank you, Karen, very helpful, especially having a module for student midwives in university. Louisa, hi Louisa, asked if you can come and work at her hospital, her local hospital. Laura says that bereavement midwives are unsung heroes. What does this say? Okay, that's just taking me back up to the top, sorry. And Laura's got put a comment in there. Karen's put her email address in the chat if you're interested to contact her, which I advise that you do. And it's just a compliment for all of us. Thank you for putting this webinar together. Emma's asked, can I ask if there's anything that you have put together for bereavement midwives who support Black families? I am in East Kent and we support a fair few Black families. We know there is cultural differences and sensitivities, but it would be great to gain a greater understanding of this. That's to you, Karen.
Oh, okay. I think to answer that question, there's nothing that we have put together for Black and ethnic minority, and this goes back to, I think, having that conversation and understanding the population in your area, because that's where it starts. It's different for everyone, and I think that SANS did a really good project. They call it a listening project, and I think it's where they interviewed about, I think, 53 women. And some of the themes that came around that is being listened to, being heard, personalized care, communication, and safety and learning. And I think if you look at across board in the ethnic minority, those are the themes. They don't feel listened to, they don't feel heard. So I would say, I think it's important to look at the women in your area, perhaps hold focus groups, understand what is important to them, and then adapt. Sorry, I'm in the office and my light keeps going off. And then offer care based on and what their needs are. So again, conversation is really important. One size doesn't fit all. So it's understanding your population and what's important to them, and then tailoring the care for them.
Beautiful response. Thank you, Karen. Now moving on to the comments for Illy and Celine. Natasha says, I'm currently studying psychology and totally agree on the mental health support required for Black families. Nicola says, I once met a lady whose grandma was dying and she finally told the family that she had a stillbirth 75 years before and never told anyone. That's the point you were making, Illy, about us holding everything in all the time. And Laura's put in your Instagram page and a link to your book. Love it, love it. Louisa says we need a hub. Claire says this is such a helpful, insightful webinar. So much to learn and so many valid points. Thank you so much. Is it possible to have details on Celine's charity about navigating maternity services?
Yes, that's absolutely fine. So the Instagram handle is conversations.with.the.midwife. But I can put it in the chat as well.
I think somebody did.
Oh, Laura. Oh.
I've been on it. I've been trying to get all you guys on there. I'm making everybody shine. Yeah.
And Tasha's asked, is there a way to stay connected with everyone that is speaking in the webinar today? I follow a few of you, but I would really love to attend again. Again? This wasn't going to be an annual thing, but maybe it needs to be. Yeah. And stay in contact with everyone. If you're on social media and you're happy to, just pop your handle into the chat, please. Louisa says you can limit the trauma rather than add to it. And Celine, your IG is actually in here.
Okay. Laura's my PA, so she can put us all in.
Amni says this is so important. People are afraid to open up these conversations, but it's by having these conversations that we improve care. Absolutely agree. More links to Tommy's in the chat. Oh, Laura, you're on it. Links to Sand in the chat. Oh my gosh, what's my face doing there? My face is there. Louisa's added her podcast. Fantastic podcast, actually. Louisa Hendrickson. You can find her on Instagram as well. Katie, this session has been exceptional. I'm glad you got in, Katie. Oh, I'm proud of you all. From Tasha. Well done from Bashirat. Thanks so much, Karen and team. Well done to the speakers. I think I'm going to move on to the next session because we're always running over.
Can I just answer this last question that's in the chat before I run?
Yes.
Which is how to encourage midwives to attend bereavement sessions. This speaks volumes to how much we are looking at the importance of this type of care. It should not be a choice. I'm not really sure why it is not part of mandatory training when we are looking at the rates of bereavement in Black families, white families. We're seeing that people are having way more complex pregnancies. There's lots of loss, and I'm not sure why it's a choice. It shows that it is not seen as actually what can be a normal part of pregnancy, as sad as it is, and that we are not treating it in the way that it should be treated with the space that it warrants. So this is why you get people postnatally hanging in this really weird space, like I don't know where to turn, who to go to, etc., because no one has even considered that perhaps there needs to be some type of thought from the professional that maybe this person might require other services at some point. Doesn't mean you need to tell them about them, but we as midwives, we should be knowing what they are. We should be knowing where to signpost so that we don't fumble and we don't say the wrong things, and we are looking after people in a way that is supportive, therapeutic, and trauma informed. So really the short answer is I don't understand why it's a choice, and that perhaps it's something to speak to management about, making it somewhat mandatory to attend at least a sort of hour session, which I'm sure they could facilitate. Now I've got to go, so I'm sorry.
Oh, you're muted, Alicia.
Thank you so much for your time, Illy. Thank you for coming.
Alicia, can I just add a couple of points really quickly?
Go ahead.
In regards to mandatory training, it's really frustrating because there's so many things that should be on our mandatory training platforms and they're not, because other things supersede them. But the things that make up the mandatory training are why we need to have bereavement training. So, for example, there's so many different care bundles of why we need to reduce smoking in pregnancy. Actually, there's other things that also supersede that. So Ilian is right. We need to hound our management about what else. And this is for Karen as well, in terms of this is a great opportunity to collaborate with our colleagues in other trusts. So East Kent sound like they need a bit of support. Great opportunity for us to put something together to support them, and, you know, more co-production, co-working.
Lovely. Thank you. That was amazing. We've overrun by like almost 15 minutes. But I think it's necessary for us to go through the comments. Sorry, Laura and Toyin. I'm going to introduce you to both now, because you're both going to talk about what is a maternal mental health service and what is peer support. Take it away, guys.
I mean, Toyin and I can talk for England, but we will try our best together to not disappoint you, because the two of us on a Friday, we're supposed to meet for an hour and it's always 3 hours. So good luck. Don't worry, Danielle. I promise I'll leave you some time. Toyin, do you want to introduce yourself, lovely?
Yes, of course. My goodness, what a powerful evening this has been so far. But yes, my name's Toyin Adeyinka, and I am one of the Expert by Experience coordinators for the awesome Helix team.
And I'm Laura. I'm the midwife one of the midwives. There's another midwife as well that I work with, that's part of Helix team as well.
So we're going to start with Laura, and I'm going to start with this question. What is a maternal mental health service?
So we thought it was quite important to kind of break this down, because we use terminology in health, don't we? And sometimes like, what is that? Who's involved? Yes. So historically, I was a mental health midwife, and before that, I spent 6 wonderful years being a caseload midwife with the incredible Celine Walters, who kept me sane and made me the midwife I am today. So I'm a big fan of her. I'm loving all the love today, so I'm keeping it going. But when I was a mental health midwife, there was some women that kind of fell through the gap. So if women had more severe, moderate mental health and their baby had died, they would have been discharged from their mental health team. If they had a baby that was going to be removed due to social services, the baby was going to be removed for whatever reason, then the mental health service would disappear. If they had severe tocophobia or birth trauma, there wasn't really a service for them. So this has been years and years of campaigning saying, you know, this is a group of women and families that are being missed, who really, really need support. So they created these maternal mental health services that started 3 years ago, 4 years ago now, 3 years ago, with early implementers and fast followers. And so they're up and around the country. I think there's 42 now around England. And unhelpfully, they all aren't the same. Because this is the first time they've ever been created, people have kind of had to done some work to see, okay, actually my area really needs this. This is a really big gaping hole. And other services have opened up all 4 pathways. Some have done maybe 3 of the pathways. I would say that one pathway that's not had that much is the birth separation. Mm-hmm. So those women who've had babies removed due to social care. And I think that's because it just takes a lot more time and money and co-working, that we just don't have the money in our small teams to actually do well and do safely. So that is my big push for another conversation for another day. But for us here in Helix, when we first started to do the scoping work that Toyin was heavily involved in from the beginning, and then Danielle and I joined soon after it started, was that there was a lot of gap and hole for families who had bereavement, especially those with more moderate to severe mental health. And the really great thing about maternal mental health service is it's psychology led, and Danielle and many psychologists, I don't know if you've ever met a psychologist, they're just good humans. They're great at listening, which is good, it's part of their job. But they're just really nice, warm people to be around. It's also the incredible thing that we get to have Toyin, and I won't take away what her role is because that's coming up. And that there's lots of community-based stuff. So I get to do loads of health inequity work. I get to spend tons of time with Chrissy Brown, Motivational Mums Club, and get to do groups. I get to spend time with Celine, go in the conversations with the midwife. It's just such a joyous thing. I get to do training and spend quality time with Karen. I get to hang out with Karen. I get paid to hang out with Karen. So it's just like really lovely parts of this job that I didn't get to do when I was mental health, because it's not just about supporting the families, it's about how we can do preventative work. So that's kind of a maternal mental health service in a nutshell, and every service in your area will be different. And I'll put something in the chat later where you can find, at least for London, what's available in your area. So Toyin, over to you now. What is an expert by experience coordinator?
Okay, thanks, Laura. If it's okay, just before I begin answering this question, I just want to get across, just because peer support can sometimes be seen as a little bit fluffy, and hopefully by the end of this, people will see peer support as a lot more than what I think sometimes the assumption can be, especially when you're working with people who've experienced, obviously in this case, a baby loss, and maybe a bit scared and nervous, because they tend to think we might, react in a way that's a bit uncomfortable. But actually, those who have an experience connected to, said service bring so much. So yeah, I just wanted to quickly get that out of the way. Well, in this role, I'm one of the people that reflects those who've experienced baby loss and trauma, and I'm able to share experiences share those experiences and stories more openly. So it's clear that I have a real understanding and that I get it. And that I really do get how it feels. And not that every experience of baby loss is universal. My role is to continuously keep women and birthing people at the centre of our work, never losing sight that we are working to support a third person, their family, and not a statistic. Oh, Laura, I think you're on mute.
I was doing so well. I'm so sorry. I'm glad you were paying attention. Sorry, Toyin. So why did you want to do this role, Toyin?
Yeah, this is a massive question, and I'm really going to do my best to keep this short. So one of my baby losses was quite distressing and really brought me to the edge. It's only with hindsight that I'm able to see that actually if I had someone who had experienced something similar, that I may not have experienced those really low moments, which were quite extreme, and was also very isolating. Don't get me wrong, I actually had amazing support around me, but it also felt too painful to share. And I actually was also carrying quite a lot of shame around one of these losses. Being a woman of my heritage also played into how I would be judged into sharing my story, which has been talked about obviously since this call has began. And as I continue, it does flow through of wanting to just how difficult that can be. And again, also depending on the type of loss you had, can also make that extremely difficult. This also leads on to always wanting to advocate for the seldom heard and held voices. And I'm going to emphasize the held voices bit, because as we've heard before, and especially when it comes to Black women who've experienced baby loss, we're not always given that room to grieve. We're not given the same level of compassion that other women and birthing people are often given. As again, it's been highlighted before, how conversations can be, this idea of kind of just getting on with it and not having this space to be able to talk about what is often a really tragic loss. It's also important to note that regardless of the type of loss, and when I say this, I'm thinking of those who had to have terminations for non-medical reasons, and really naming that, because sometimes services do not support those women. And I think I'm really proud that Helix does. We can also support in signposting and a debrief as well for those women who maybe need it, which can also be really empowering.
Thank you, Toyin. Yeah, I think you and I, when we first started doing this work together, didn't we? That coming from mental health into bereavement for the first time, I never realized there was this hierarchy of loss, and the importance that we kind of don't put language on something. You know, whatever reason a person decides to have a termination, it's not really a decision, is it? No. It's a horrible thing to have to come to terms with for whatever reason. So I think it's nice having that space that's open for all of us to kind of be together.
Yes. because there's real grief in that loss, and it is a loss, and it shouldn't be seen as anything other than that.
Yeah. So what does peer support actually look like in Helix Service?
Okay, so peer support in Helix, first thing we're going to talk about with this lovely symbol of the tree is, for any of you who know, Tree of Life, and we have tailored this for women and birthing people who've experienced a baby loss. So this is the first time we've done this, and it has been really, really amazing. My lovely colleague and co-facilitator is on. It was meant to be joined us this evening, and so I'm just a really big shout out to Ningi. But one of the things I want to highlight about Tree of Life and what we have learned most recently, or the space actually, let me just get straight to it. So Ningi in one of our most recent sessions made space. The women who have attended are varied, and as in cultural backgrounds, and Ningi made it very clear, and I believe this is something Eleni was referring to, about making it known from the outset that you are welcome, and when it comes to your story and sharing from maybe a cultural or religious background, and through opening that door, the women who were the non-white women were sharing those stories. So one of the things about Tree of Life, I just need to say, it's a therapeutic program, but it's meant to be that you're not really meant to talk about the trauma. These women in our group want to talk about the trauma, and that was like, okay, we're going to run with this. So it wasn't like, oh, we're not going to do that. We've just let the women essentially just, when I say dictate, in a really good way. And again, it's lots of learning going, with this. But the women who one was talking about, and I feel like the video, both of those videos that Karen showed were really powerful. But one woman in our group had shared this thing around not naming the baby, but not naming the loss. And it was coming from, you heard, and it was very painful, but it was trying to say it from the mum to her daughter who just wanted her to heal. But it was said in a way which was like, you just need to move on. I won't go through the whole wording, but it was quite brutal. But what it meant for this woman is that she's kind of closed about wanting to share. So having Tree of Life has definitely been amazing for her being able to share that. And just to say, with Tree of Life, the basis of it is how we learn, we pick out our strengths to help us to keep going after a baby loss, because life can often stop, or you wonder how you're going to keep going. So it's looking inwards to see the things that we have already to just keep doing that. Moving on to peer support. Now this can be a little bit more, again, something more tailored, and can be one-to-ones, because with obviously baby loss, it's not always about the loss either. There's other issues that can come up because of the loss, and it can be relationship things, anxieties that have developed. And just to say, these women that come through our Tree of Life and peer support have had therapeutic care by our wonderful psychologists. So when they get to myself and my other awesome colleague, they've already done a load of work, and you can hear how far some of them have already come. As an example, there's a woman who developed this really strong fear of something was going to happen to her, and how far she's come with stepping out her home and all of these types of things. But then with myself, it may be like, okay, how do I take things a little bit further just to bring that whole her new normal really back to the surface. And some people are also not very comfortable going to a group, especially to talk about baby loss. So, but at least they have those options of having a one-on-one with somebody who does understand where they're coming from. Our coffee mornings are very new, and with these, it will be a way of breaking that isolation, coming to meet other women and birthing people who've experienced something similar, possibly making friends, because we know some people, as has been shared, not everybody has someone to talk to. And even if you do have someone to talk to, it can still be very difficult. it can be difficult if you want to talk about all the fact and anniversaries coming up, something I went through a little bit myself recently, and that thing around not having anyone else to remember, but actually we can have that space. We're thinking of doing things around memory making to really just so people have something, you know, that really does acknowledge, and that can be something that reflects something from their cultural or religious background, you know, because there are many other different cultures, as we know, deal with death in very different ways. So it's just knowing that this is a safe space created to honour all of those things and basically naming all of that. So yeah, thanks, Laura.
I was thinking, as you're, I mean, you always make me feel very lucky that I get to work with you anyway. But I was thinking about the project we decided on a team, isn't it, when the families are being discharged from Helix, that they get a pack of forget-me-not seeds so that they can plant and have some kind of like onward thing. So it's just always thinking about, this isn't just what you might think a service is going to look like. There's lots of different ways that we want to support and hold you. So yeah, I'm very, very
100%.
lucky to be in this team.
And I wish I could say more.
Well, you can. We have one more slide.
Oh,
So that's good. So I just wanted to honor that all this is all like the stuff that you do that people can probably see when they come into a service, but your role is completely woven into Helix from the very beginning and continual. So do you want to give some examples of some of the stuff that you've been involved in from the very beginning?
From the very beginning, way back when. As Laura said, this has been going for quite a while. Actually, well, before we were even named Helix, and there was a lot of mapping that went on. There was a lot of focus groups that went on to make sure we were really getting into the community, to make sure that when we were up and running, when it came to leaflets, when it came to information, when it came to even down to referrals, that those forms were appropriate and that they were sensitive where they needed to be. Which you would think is everywhere, but some things might be a bit difficult to make very sensitive. One of the other things as well regarding referrals is that we input into those meetings, always really just keeping those women and birthing people right at the heart of everything. And I feel that we're very fortunate as a team that when we are getting those referrals that some of you wonderful midwives may have already sent through, the care that is taken, even for those who maybe not get accepted to our service, I wish I could film it just as an example, maybe not all of it, because you might be a bit worried about our team after that, but moving on very quickly, honestly, the compassion that every single member of our team shows is just amazing. And I wouldn't have been able to continue to kind of essentially thrive, because a lot of my healing unexpectedly took place since I've done this job, and I didn't see that coming. And I have been really blessed to work with such amazing women. And I share this because I really hope if there was someone out there who you feel does need this service, that really and truly please believe that they do care from beginning to end, the love and care that goes on. And even with me, I feel that I don't want to use the word princess, but I'm going to for the sake of this conversation. I feel like I'm able to have those very vulnerable moments. People have seen me cry quite a bit in my team. And I've never been made to feel awkward. I shouldn't have said this, even when sometimes I have to say things that might be kind of getting really straight to the point of something I'm not happy about. I've never been made to feel, oh, angry black woman's coming here. None of this. And I feel like it's just the respect and equality, especially from the role as well, because peer support, I know that some of my awesome colleagues in different MHSs maybe have not had the same experience. And because there was a lot of co-production. So in that whole planning, what we would do behind the scenes as well was contact other expert by experience workers and peer workers to see what worked, but also what didn't work, you know. And so that really informed as well how we are and how we're going to continue to be. Also, just to say, where we've talked about the referral forms and everything else, I am currently also developing some parent courses to do with loss. And these types of groups are for women and birthing people, but also for dads and partners and those that are supporting loved ones that have also experienced a loss. So there's lots that we do.
There is lots and lots. And I feel there's not this like hierarchy between the team either. Like even though Danielle is our leader,
Yes.
we definitely have like nobody feels embarrassed to say anything. Like I'll never forget one week there was a really heavy referral come in and we all really felt it, and our assistant psychologist was quick to say, okay, but let's think about, and and being in a team like that where somebody that's technically quite junior felt strong enough and safe enough to say, actually guys, let's think about this as a team just to stick with our goals. Is this right with our, I think is just a really nice safe space to be in. So
100%.
yeah, it's really lovely. So just some of the take-home messages. I think I was going to do the sandwich. Yeah, you first.
Oh yeah, in the middle. So Black women, birthing people and their families need this the space to be vulnerable, and they're okay to not be strong. Again, I feel like it's been said over and over on this call that it is so important to see them as they are in front of you, not whatever nonsense stereotypes, whatever is going through your head. But we know that comes down to training, which has been talked about. So that's not my area, so I'm going to keep quiet about that. But I'm definitely advocating, please, yes, for the training. For those of you who are professionals who have experienced things like of baby loss, that you too deserve that space as well. And if anything is, I'm sure and I hope that there are people that you can also talk to if this has been something that's really touched you.
Yeah, we really wanted everyone to know that maternal mental health services are here to support you and your needs. So, you might think of like, oh, I'm going to go for psychological therapy. There's different forms of psychological therapy, but there's also the peer support. There's the stuff you can get involved with afterwards. You can help us with designing future projects by staying on the register where Toyin and Veronica can link with you to help improve our service. We're always asking for feedback. So yes, do link with your maternal mental health service in your area. And again, I'll put the London ones definitely in the chat after, so you can find out if you're London. But if there's anybody here from another maternal mental health service, to celebrate your service, you can put that in the chat, please. And Toyin, last message.
So peer support can help open the door to not feeling alone, to make that connection and to be heard. And myself and Veronica are two women who've had our own losses. They're very different to each other, but what we want you to know and feel is that you really aren't alone, and that you can continue to live, because we know that baby loss, especially if you have children, if you have a loss and you have children, that has like another side to it, and your children, I suppose, in a way become your reason to keep going. But we want you to keep going for yourself too, because you also deserve that and matter. So yeah, that's it.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you both. You both summarised all your points really succinctly at the end, but I just wanted to add, it is so important that services make it known that all groups are welcome, and that it isn't just for one specific type of person. They need to be accessible to all, and that needs to be very explicit. And I loved what you mentioned about memory making. Not everybody wants to go home with a box. Sometimes I love the seed idea. I did the seeds. I love that. I had that from the hospice, and I also gave away seeds at my son's funeral. I love that. I just love that. And I used to grow teddy bear sunflowers for him every year. So I gave away teddy bear sunflower seeds at his funeral. Shameless plug. There's actually 2 events I want to let people know about that are about peer support. So the first one is tomorrow. It's actually, and going back to what you were saying, Celine, about being able to express your grief and connect with other bereaved parents in artistic ways. So tomorrow there's an art show being held in London, and it's showcasing the artwork of a bereaved Black mother who expresses her story of the preventable stillbirth of her daughter through her artwork. And there will also be, and this speaks to the memory making that you mentioned just now, Toyin, There'll also be another bereaved Black mother who makes personalisable baby loss books. So you can have a baby loss book with characters that reflect your baby. So that's you'll get to meet both of them tomorrow at the London event. Tickets are actually sold out on Eventbrite, but please do DM me if you want to come along. And on Sunday, so the SANS roundtable group that I mentioned earlier, they're actually putting on an event on Sunday called Walk and Talk for Black Baby Loss Awareness Week. And they're going to be walking, there's a set route in London, and they're going to finish up by going to a Trinidadian restaurant. So please do have a look at my on the Instagram page for details of that also. Gina, I see you're in the chat. Hi, Gina. It's Gina's Family's Restaurant, Gina Reeves, the mother of Dante. Thank you both, Laura and Toyin. Now we're going to move on to the final section of the evening. Thank you, Dr. Danielle, for waiting so patiently. I'm sorry I overran. Had to be done, I'm sorry. So now Dr. Danielle Jackson's she's a principal clinical psychologist. She's now going to speak to the topic of mental health support and baby loss. The floor is yours.
So how much time do I have? Are we
20 minutes?
Right, okay. I'll do
Will
my
this
best.
kick us out, Laura? Will this kick us out if we overrun?
I don't know. I have no idea.
Okay.
I have no idea. This is my first rodeo for sure. I just saw Claire put the chat, so now I'm going to put her on the spot. So Claire, can we keep going or does it stop? Yeah, I don't know. Claire is my guru. I don't know what I'd do without her. Claire Clifferton is the best. I love her. You're fine to continue.
Fine.
Great, thanks.
Okay. I'll try not to talk very much, but I may not be successful. I just want to check as well, because I'm using two screens. Can you just see my slide on the screen in front of you? Yeah, lovely. Okay. All right. So I will try and get through this quite quickly. So yeah, I'm just speaking to mental health support and baby loss. So as we know, unfortunately, perinatal loss is really common and can occur at any point during pregnancy, during birth, and soon after birth. So we usually consider perinatal loss within 1 year after birth. Affects 1 in 4 pregnancies. I mean, I guess, you know, the figure could be higher than that because there's early pregnancy loss, which, you know, I'm not sure that the figures always get captured for that accurately. And as people have mentioned already, it's still a taboo and under-discussed issue, unfortunately. So just a bit more detail breaking down the prevalence of different types of loss. So we have miscarriage, ectopic pregnancies, terminations, stillbirth, neonatal death, and SIDS. I'm not going to go over that because Karen helpfully has already spoken about that. So I'm just going to get straight into the impact on mental health. So loss of a child by miscarriage, stillbirth, neonatal death, or by being taken into care increases vulnerability to mental illness for the mother. And she should get additional monitoring and support because of that. I don't think that really happens personally. You might have had different experiences of that, but it's a real I'll go on to speak in a bit more detail about the implications of this, but this table here really suggests that there's high rates of where women have died by suicide or died in relation to substance misuse. There were high rates of perinatal loss for those women. So many women who've died by suicide or due to substance misuse, there's been a high level of loss, perinatal loss, which I think is horrific. So we've spoken a little bit about this already, but grief is normal. It's adaptive. Grief happens because we've loved. So it shouldn't be pathologized. It shouldn't be medicalized that, you know, there's something wrong with grief, that, you know, if you're grieving and you're sad, that there's something wrong. It's the most natural thing in the world. However, although grief is normal, the death of a baby at any point of gestation, for any reason, so at any point in pregnancy, for any reason, is also a major stressor. Toyin referred to that earlier. You know, it doesn't matter what kind of a loss it is, whether it is a termination for non-medical reasons, it can still result in mental health problems that require treatment. So PTSD is really common following loss. As you can see there, there's a range from 7 to 28% of women and birthing people experience PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, following a perinatal loss. And those figures there also don't include the rates of PTSD for fathers. You know, that's really under, we don't really know enough about how many dads are affected. And it can also affect subsequent pregnancies as well following a loss. Following pregnancy loss, women are more likely to experience depression and anxiety than non-bereaved women. And this can impact on the couple relationship. The father, I haven't said it explicitly, but when I say father, you know, it could be a same-sex partner.
Oh no, Danielle, have you frozen, my love?
Yeah, completely frozen.
Oh no, poor Danielle.
Hopefully she can leave and come back in again.
We were doing so well.
It's the new technology, isn't it?
I know.
Not able to help her. Not sure what to do now.
It's a bit difficult because we're not psychologists and we don't want to sort of start speaking to Danielle.
Yeah, I've got her slides. I could, but she is so smart.
Yeah.
Or maybe text her and see whether.
Yeah.
Well, I think she's probably trying to
get back in.
Yeah.
I think while we were waiting, I've put a link in the chat, and this is about the baby loss certificates, recognition of parenthood that were launched by the government for families that have had a loss before 24 weeks. So for anyone who would like to request a certificate, you can follow the instructions on the website.
It's a really good idea. Thank you for that, Karen.
Am I back?
Yay! I can hear you.
My 20 minutes is dwindling.
Don't worry.
Right, let's try again. Right, I will go back. Yes, so I think I was talking about the impact on the wider network and the wider family, where there's mental health and baby loss. So why does it matter? You know, I guess there's lots of people who might think, well,
Danielle, sorry, lovely. Sorry, your slides have gone. Do you want me to share? Do you want me to share them from my end, and you can just tell me next slide?
Yeah.
Okay, let me do that. Sorry, love.
That's all right.
I mean, if anyone's going to have the stressful time, it's good. It's the psychologist. You know, this is the calm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right, let me just stop this.
Can you? We were on. We're going on to why does it matter? Did you say?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm on that one now. Can you see it?
I don't know where. Okay. My version of the slides is slightly different to the one that you've got, but I'll just speak to my slides and then I'll tell you when to move if that's okay.
Of course.
my keeping to time has just crashed and burned. Sorry, Alicia. Okay, so the answer is it does matter. So more than 1 in 10 women develop a mental illness during the perinatal period, and they're at substantially elevated risk of suffering a relapse or reoccurrence of a pre-existing disorder postpartum. So after I guess in the postnatal period, whether or not there's, so after a loss, I guess, would be included within that. Suicide is amongst the leading causes of maternal death. So, you know, we absolutely would consider maternal death to be somebody who does not have a live baby. And it's not just an impact on the woman or birthing person, it also impacts babies. So although somebody might have experienced a loss, they might have older children, and they're going to be affected by their parents' mental health, in terms of, you know, their brain development and their social and emotional development, and it can also affect the development of the fetus. So a woman might have had a loss and then had a subsequent pregnancy. She's really likely to be really stressed about that subsequent pregnancy. She's probably going to be, right, okay, well, we've got to the 12-week scan. So now let's hope, you know, now we've just got to get to the 20-week scan, and kind of marking those milestones in subsequent pregnancy related to previous losses. So the previous loss can affect subsequent children as well. And of course, there's economic costs of perinatal mental health difficulties as well, in terms of, you know, being absent from work and all of those sorts of things, and an impact on subsequent and or live children, as I've already said. So next slide, please, Laura. Just make sure I'm in the right spot. Yes. So before I go into this, I guess I just want to name that I'm white British. I'm speaking to a topic that I'm absolutely not positioning myself as an expert on at all, but I feel really passionate about the area, about addressing health inequalities and working with baby loss. So I guess if you could give me permission to be clumsy rather than clever, just putting that out there before I go into this, and happy to be shot down too. So everything that I've just spoken about loss, about mental health, may also be compounded by any experiences of racism during the loss journey and prior to this as well. So, you know, we know that during maternity care, or, you know, with sonographers and all the rest of it, then there may be experiences of inadequate care, of racism, but also not forgetting any racist experiences of racism prior to this. So there'll be that legacy there as well. And then the experience of loss could also represent another experience of not being listened to, of being judged, of being discriminated against, and, you know, all the other things that we know unfortunately happens on a really regular basis. So it's possible that might impact a woman or birthing person speaking up about poor care, or asking questions about poor care, you know, because people might have a certain assumption about me. Is it okay to ask this question? Is it okay to challenge things in a particular way? How is this going to be received? As well as, you know, speaking about the disparities in rates of loss and experiences of loss. So issues around institutional racism, stigma, sociocultural factors as barriers to help seeking. So I previously did some research in barriers to exploring what barriers there are to help seeking for mental health difficulties in Black community, and stigma and sociocultural factors were a massive barrier to help seeking. Also, you know, that unfortunately there's a history of misuse of the Mental Health Act in relation to ethnic diversity. So all of these things can lead to delayed help seeking potentially, which, you know, if somebody is anticipating a certain kind of response from services, then maybe they're more likely to wait until things have become much more severe, which is likely to then impact on their recovery from those mental health difficulties. Also, one of the things that we're doing some research on is how might knowledge of those disparities in outcomes affect the maternity or the loss journey. So, you know, the 5 times more statistics that we know about and we've alluded to here, you know, what impact might that have on someone's experience of loss? And potential, you know, because of some of this stuff, potential mistrust of professionals or services. You know, might previous mistrust be compounded by their loss experience, especially if medical negligence is a factor in the loss? How to be heard or listened to without having more experiences of being dismissed or labelled. And as I mentioned earlier, this might lead to avoiding mental health care too. And also, I can't remember who mentioned it, I think a few people might have mentioned needing to keep in mind the cultural differences about the meaning of baby loss, about rituals and practices, particularly in therapy. It's something that we think about a lot with the people we work with, and not apply a Western mindset to this. You know, just being curious and open about, well, what, you know, what is the meaning of baby loss for you and your family and your community? What are the rituals and practices? Because something that we might think is entirely appropriate might not be well received by the person in front of you. And all of this, in addition to the already present emotional burden of, you know, a legacy of being on the receiving end of racism. Okay. I'm racing through all this and don't think I'm doing it any justice at all, but I really want to try and keep to time. So
doing very well. Then just an interruption. Danielle's didn't arrive back from her holiday at 2 o'clock this morning, so I think you're doing incredibly well, Danielle.
Thank you.
So keep going.
Okay, so I thought I'd speak to what I know. So I thought I would speak about what Helix offers. Now, you know, as Toyin and Laura have said, you know, we're a maternal mental health service, so we cover Southwark, Lewisham, Lambeth and Croydon, and other MMHSs will offer things in a slightly different way, but I thought it might be helpful just to speak to some of the things that our service does, and you know, the remit will be pretty similar-ish across the country. So what we offer to help with all of the things that I've been talking about so far is psychological therapy. Now that could be one-to-one, just, you know, somebody sitting with a psychologist talking about the loss or not talking about the loss. We've got group format as well. So we've got Tree of Life group that Toyin's mentioned. We've also got pregnancy after loss group as well. And the focus of the sessions will be, I guess, on whatever's brought the woman to our service. It's mental health difficulties in the context of loss. So often there'll be trauma. There might, although we don't specifically focus on birth trauma, often a loss is traumatic. So if there's trauma symptoms like PTSD, as I mentioned earlier, then we'll work on that. It might be about developing self-compassion. Often where there's a baby loss, women beat themselves up, they're hard on themselves. There might be shame or blame or guilt, and developing that self-compassion and not being so hard on themselves is something that we would help with. Finding ways, as we mentioned earlier, you know, the forget-me-not seeds, for instance, finding ways to help the woman or birthing person to continue the bond with the baby, that, you know, the relationship doesn't end when the baby dies. It continues, and helping the woman to grieve, to facilitate the grief. So when I mention loss work, it's about, we're not trying to fix the pain, we're not trying to make it go away, because we can't do that. Not with it, you know, the best will in the world, we can't, and we wouldn't, because that's not, the goal isn't to stop it hurting, it's to enable the person to tolerate the pain and to live their lives despite the pain, and not let the pain always be in charge and take over. I guess that's a large part of what we do. We support clients to consider self-care, how they can take care of themselves. Again, that links into self-compassion, and access support from friends and family. So finding ways to, you know, to talk to friends and family about what's helpful, what isn't helpful, about the support, you know, the conversations that I had around the loss. Being able to have difficult conversations. Toyin and Laura mentioned earlier about co-produced part of the service. But then a big part of what we do is actually the indirect work. So we're not like regular therapy services where we just kind of do therapy and that's it. We've got a massive remit around reducing health inequalities. You know, the disparities that we've been talking about today. We take an active role in trying to challenge that, and starting with ourselves, actually. So, you know, the point there that we're trying to make therapy more accessible, we gather lots of data to make sure that we're reaching the people that we should be reaching. And if not, why not? What are we doing wrong? How do we get people who need our service through the door? You know, comparing that to kind of the local census data for our borough, to really get into the nuts and bolts of, you know, are we really seeing who we need to? We are involved in lots of training of different professionals, teaching. We're involved in research, you know, developing research projects for supporting maternity to be more trauma informed, for understanding loss experiences of Black women. I'm supervising a trainee clinical psychologist at the moment who's doing her dissertation on that. We facilitate trauma informed care as a way of preventing birth trauma and traumatic experiences of care. Advocacy is a massive part of what we do. We challenge, I'm very conscious of time, trying to really race through it. We challenge systems where, for instance, a system or a trust isn't gathering ethnicity data or data on, you know, different protected characteristics in relation to loss. Working with maternity systems. We feed into policy change at the local and national level. We have fantastic clinical psychologists who come and do their placements with us to learn about how we work, you know, how to, you know, the work that we do with women, but all the sort of indirect work as well. Equality, diversity and inclusion, as Toyin has alluded to, is part of everything that we do. It really is everything we do. That's really something that's important to us, and not just a tick box exercise. We take feedback from clients on their experience of our service. We've set up a health inequalities working group across South London, you know, kind of starting on our doorstep, really. And again, just a reminder to, you know, find your local MMHS. Please do reach out and get help. That's it. I went 2 minutes over, sorry.
No,
and
that's
Laura,
fantastic.
and Laura, I forgot to tell you to change slides. Sorry.
You did fantastically well. Thank you so much. To be so sleep deprived and to pull that off. I want to thank all of the fantastic speakers. You've all been wonderful. I wish I was on the other end watching you all, actually. I'm looking forward to watching the playback when we figure out how to save it and disseminate it. So it has been recorded. We'll let you know when it's available to view. Laura, thank you again. Karen, thank you. Toyin, thank you. Celine, thank you. Danielle, thank you. This evening has been phenomenal. Black Baby Loss Awareness Week continues. Tomorrow the theme is pregnancy after loss. Someone's coming in now. I'll let them
Did I
in.
deny the mention? I'll let him in.
So tomorrow the theme is pregnancy after loss. There are 2 lives, Instagram lives, one at 1 p.m. with the founder of Mila's Present, so the Black bereaved mother that I mentioned who makes personalised baby loss books. She will be present at the event tomorrow, and I'm also doing an Instagram live with her from the venue. So let's see how that goes. And then at 7 o'clock, I'll also be doing an Instagram live with Karen Burgess of Petals, the baby loss counselling charity. Saturday, the theme is support services. So I want to signpost and highlight services that are often overlooked. For example, one of the services is a physiotherapist that focuses on postpartum care for women that are bereaved. Because if you don't come home with your baby, that's all you think about. And you do sometimes forget about yourself. But actually you're still postpartum. So she focuses on women that have had loss in the postpartum period and supporting them at that time, because they're often very much overlooked. And then on Sunday, it's a recap and reflection, and also the event, the walk and talk for Black Baby Loss Awareness Week. Thank you so much for sticking with us for 2 hours. Thank you very, very much. Good night.
Good night. Thank you, everyone.
Night. Thank you, Alicia, for putting on this thing
Thank
for the
you,
second year.
Alicia.
Your dream.
Thank you. It was amazing.
Thank you. Bye.
Good night. Bye, everyone.